and welcome back to Bookish theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about ENHYPEN's dimension answer, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of all the clues that we have up until now to see what they can tell us about this upcoming comeback. Before we get to that, however, I would like to take a second to thank all of you for the amazing support that I received in my last video. That was my very first time showing myself on camera, and I'm not gonna lie, I was very nervous about it, but your support made it so much easier. So thank you so much, you guys, because it really means a lot to me. Now, much like anticipated in my last video, today is gonna be my very first attempt at changing format a little bit. The reason why I made this decision is because with the webtoons coming out and more content coming out as well, I figured that I needed an upgrade a little bit in order to provide you with more content as fast as I can. So today we're gonna try this new format a little bit and see what's going on, alright? I'm very sorry to engines that you're gonna be the guinea pigs of the situation. I'm so sorry, but you know, I trust in your feedback. Let me know if this is something that you can get behind, because if this is gonna work, then you know the webtoons are gonna be like a walk in the park. If it's not gonna work, we're gonna need to find another solution. So please let me know in the comments down below, alright? Okay, I trust you guys. Thank you so much. In the meantime, however, let's jump right in. We have a lot to unpack, a lot of clues to uncover, so let's start from here and see what we get. Now, Dimension Answer is going to be the second installment of the Dimension series, but if we take a look at the track list, it also seems like it's gonna be the last. In Dimension Dilemma, we had the intro and the interlude, whereas in Dimension Answer, we are gonna have the outro, so this means that this stage of their story is coming to an end. If we take a look at the outro, however, another interesting detail to point out is that it's gonna be called Day 2, and this is actually very telling, because if they're introducing Day 2 at the end of Dimension Answer, it means that up until now we were still in Day 1. This might imply that all the comebacks that we have up until now are basically just phase 1 of their journey. In Border Day 1 they crossed the border of their debut, in Border Carnival they ended up in this strange world where everything is flipped upside down, in Dimension Dilemma they started to question who they are in relation to this new world and if they made the right choice in crossing the border, and last but not least, in Dimension Answer we're gonna have the answer to this dilemma. Much like Jake anticipates in the sound preview, the ending of Day 1 essentially leads us to the beginning of Day 2, and according to the lyrics, this is the real beginning of the story. This means that up until now, this was just a warm-up, so to speak, right? It was the boys crossing the border, trying to get used to the strange world that they found themselves in, but also trying to figure out who they are in relation to this world. This means that them finding the answer to their dilemma will essentially lead them to a new stage of their journey, and according to what we know so far, their answer is no. But not to what exactly? What was the question? Let's take a look. Now, back in Tamed and Dashed, for instance, this dilemma was presented as them being divided between two worlds. One side is the side of the boy and the human that they kinda left behind the moment they crossed the border, whereas the new world is the new world of the music industry that can also be compared to the vampire self that is awakening after crossing the border. This is a reality that essentially embodies their dreams come true, right? This is a reality that promises beauty, wealth, power, eternity, but at the same time, as bright as it is, it's also a place full of shadows and temptations that you have to be careful about. This is a place that awakens your own shadow. It makes you thirsty, ambitious, drunk, dazed, and if you're not careful, you can be swallowed up by this darkness, which is essentially the darkness that you have inside of yourself. This is something that, for example, was also introduced back in Drunk and Dazed, because if you remember, back in that song, the boys look at themselves in the mirror and the reflection is scaring them. This is because they don't recognize the person that they see in the mirror. So in Tamed and Dashed, their dilemma was to choose whether to be tamed by these desires and therefore submit to this new reality, or rather dash away and try to escape it. Now, this is a very difficult decision to take, because even if it's true that this new reality is a little bit dodgy and confusing, at the same time it's their dream. Bear in mind, the whole point of ENHYPEN's concept is that you have to give in order to take. Much like what we saw in songs like Intro the Invitation, but also Intro Whiteout, for instance, this is a place where you can take anything you want. You know, you want it, you got it, but at the same time you have to give something in return. Now, this kind of makes sense, right? But at the same time, it's also a little bit of a problem in this context, because even if the boys can take anything they want, they also have to give away the most precious things that they have. In order to cross the border and get to this carnival, the boys already did that, so even if dashing away might seem like the most obvious solution, in reality it's not that simple. If they run away, the boys end up with nothing. They already lost what they gave away, and they will lose the dream that they took, so this decision is obviously terrifying because they are afraid of losing everything. Despite of that, however, in Tame and Dash, the boys eventually dash away, but as they say themselves, this is not the right answer, because this is just a temporary solution. To an extent, we can say that the point of answer is going to be to find an alternative to the options that they were given, because neither to be tamed nor to dash away actually cut it. They shouldn't be tamed by their desires, but at the same time, they shouldn't dash away from them either, so their answer is no to both. Here's the thing, as we see in a second, this dimension answer might actually represent a moment of awakening, and if we take a look at the song previews, this awakening might actually be a literal one. Much like it was anticipated all the way back at the Mama stage, for instance, we know that this title track is gonna be called Blessed and Cursed, and in the preview, the lyrics actually tell us wake up, please open your eyes. Now this theme of waking up also continues in day 2, because in the outro, Jake actually tells us that they have to wake up early in order to get ready for the second day, because that's the real beginning. So what does it mean? Does it mean that up until now they were dreaming, or what else? Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that they were dreaming, because if you remember, back in Given and Taken, the very first thing that they told us was that they woke up in day 1. So they did wake up in day 1 the moment that they crossed the border. The difference now is that in day 2, they're gonna wake up with a different mindset, and this mindset actually originates from the epiphany that they're gonna have in Blessed and Cursed. You see, if we take a look at the press release, for instance, the song is going to be about the boys realizing that what they once thought was a blessing is actually a curse. If at the beginning they were intoxicated by this wonderful world that they found themselves in, and now they're snapping out of it and they're finally realizing the reality behind it. You see, if we go back and take a look at the first debut trailer, for instance, the dichotomy between a blessing and a curse was actually at the core of the narration even back then. At the time, for instance, the boys didn't know if their journey would end up as a blessing or a curse, and if at the beginning they were kind of intoxicated by it all and they thought it was a blessing, now they finally see that it's a curse. Now if we take a look at the concept photos, for instance, the first signs that they're waking up and starting to realize stuff can actually be found in No, because in those pictures the boys are pretty defiant. We can read sentences like "don't butt in," "you fooled me," but also "I don't buy it," and all of these sentences are actually very interesting. "Don't butt in," for instance, essentially means "don't interrupt," so this is the first sign of defiance by the boys. If in the past they were drunk, dazed, confused, and they didn't know what was going on, now they have something to say and they don't want to be interrupted. Now they want to say no, and this decision to say no is what gives them back the agency that they lost at the beginning. You see, even if in songs like Mixed Up the boys told us that they became the protagonist of this strange carnival, it's also true that up until now these protagonists were not really active agents of their lives. Even if in Blockbuster the boys told us that they want to be the protagonist of an action movie, so far the action was minimal on their part. Now don't get me wrong, obviously they crossed the border, they attended the carnival, they questioned themselves, they ran away, so they did a lot of stuff. But at the same time, the majority of their comebacks was also focused on them being drunk, being dazed, confused, feverish, and so on and so forth. If we take a look at some of their past songs, for instance, even crossing the border was a matter of fate and not so much about their decision. And if we specifically take a look at Intro the Invitation, for instance, we get the sense that the boys were initially inspired to cross the border by a flicker that blinds and deceives. Now in Flicker, this flicker is actually described as a signal that connects a world out of line, so the initial connection between ENHYPEN and the other world actually comes through this flicker that lures them in. Now in Intro the Invitation, we saw that this signal was initially sent out by a voice from the great beyond that lets them in and essentially tells them to take everything that they ever wanted. Now even if in this context we know that in order to take something they have to give something in return, at the time the boys don't know that because they're so blinded and drunk and dazed by all of that they're seeing that they don't see what is going on. In No, however, they finally realize that they've been fooled, so if before they were happily purchasing pleasures by selling hours of draws, now they don't buy it anymore. They don't believe in the lies that they've been told, and they finally broke out of the spell that put them in a daze. Even if in this reality everything has a price tag, the boys are not for sale anymore. They refuse to buy into this system and to be controlled by its rules, so in No we kinda get to see the first attempt at rebelling against it. As we see in the films, for instance, this is a reality that cursed them. They are broken and they just want it to stop, and the worst thing about this is that the entity that fooled them is the very individual that lured them in to begin with. If you look closely, for instance, when the boys are writing on the board, we also see Jungwon crossing out the first part of the word fooled. This means that the phrase "you fooled me" actually becomes "you led me", so the person that fooled them is the very person that led them to begin with. But who is this person? Well, if we take a look at the mood board, for instance, logic says that the person who fooled them is the liar. But who is the liar then? Is it one of the members, more than one, somebody else? Who is this person? Well, we don't know this yet, but what I can tell you is that there are different interpretations on the meta. If we take a look at the promotional poster, for instance, the liars can be Sonu, Jongwon, and Isung, because they are the only ones in the red light. This will also make sense story-wise, because if you remember, Jongwon is always the one who is being eaten alive by the other members, Sonu is the one bathing in blood and leading the others astray, and Hisung is the one that is being taken over by the shadows. The fact that these three members are in a red light, however, might actually be a literal red herring, because Nikki is another plausible option to keep in mind. If you look closely, Nikki is the only member with his mouth covered up, so this could imply that he is the liar. This might have also been confirmed by his teaser of Blessed and Cursed, but if we were to trust the teaser, then this means that Jay is a liar as well. Much like him, however, I'm a cynical as well, so as of right now, I don't really buy it. You see, another possible interpretation here, which incidentally is also the one that I like the most, is that none of them are the liar, but rather someone else. You see, as I mentioned before, the boys were lured in by a flicker that blinds and deceives, so all of them were deceived and all of them were lied to. This means that the actual liar is the first one that put them in a daze. It's the one that lured them in, that led them in, and then that fooled them as well. And as far as we know, this person is none other than the woman in white, which, yes, gave them immortality, but also cursed them in the process. Whether this is the case or not, however, in No, we finally get to see the boys rebelling against this reality, so instead of being played, they actually become the ones playing with the world. If in the past they wanted to become the protagonist of a blockbuster, now they're almost becoming a monster from one. They're tearing this world apart and leaving no witnesses, because much like what we see with Sono's dice, this world is like a game where you can only win or lose. Much like what they told us in the past, in this reality you can either go big or go home, and the No version is essentially telling us that they're going the biggest that they possibly can. One thing that is important to point out, however, is that no matter what they are going to do, they're going to do it their way. Now this is the most important message, I think, and a message that requires them to be brave like a lion in order to fulfill. You see, up until now, it seems that the whole point of the concept is to find an alternative that is more suitable to you. It's about the importance of waking up, it's about taking agency of your life, taming your desires instead of being tamed by them, but most importantly, finding a way to dash towards your dreams instead of running away from them. It's not so much about finding the answer, but rather finding an answer that is most suitable to you. This is something that to an extent we also see in the Yet version, because in the photos the focus is on the self. In the Instagram versions, for instance, they tell us that only I can change my life, that I have to make up my mind, that I should never give up, that I have to live today, and that most importantly, no one can do it for me. Just to circle back at the beginning of the video, this is exactly the same message that Jake anticipated in the outro, so by the looks of it, the core message of Answer is to wake up, because that is the only way to take agency of your life and find the serenity you need in order to heal. Now before I end this video, I would also like to point out that the two versions are once again split by timeline. The No version is set in the present, while the Yet version has elements of the past. Interestingly enough, moreover, the Yet version also offers a lot of parallels with the events that we saw back in Tamed and Dashed. You see, back then, the boys just escaped from the institution where they turned into vampires and just discovered that they could stand under the sun despite of their condition. And yet, we see them reference this event by showing the umbrellas, them enjoying the sunlight, and them running away together. This could actually imply that in Answer, we'll finally see how this timeline connects to the others and how the boys of the past actually get to the present. This would also give us a nice introduction of what to expect in Dark Moon the Blood Altar, but to know how things will play out, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think of this new format, if you love it, you hate it, if you have any suggestions about it, like everything is accepted, for real. Okay? As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!